Do 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 do.
Greetings fandom, Meme Lord Andre here, and for now, I've been thinking of discussing something to you guys that I've been meaning to talk about for a long time, which I haven't really done so yet because I've never really had the urge to record new videos over the past few weeks, but now I've done it. Now, I know at some point in people's lives, most, if not all, will eventually have their own children and therefore be called parents. Now, I know that there are different types of people depending on the environment that they live in and depending on the stuff that they do in their everyday lives, and because of that there will definitely be different types of parents and different ways of how they raise their children. That's not the problem here, okay? That's a normal thing. The problem is that there are those very toxic parents that think they can get away with anything just by using their children to their own personal purposes, to their own advantages, to their own thing, to their own beliefs and all that other stuff. And here I am trying to give you some of the toxic traits that these parents have, that have given their children very negative mindsets in the future, in the long run. And the outcome is quite inevitable considering the fact that parents like this exist until today. And I will give you 6 toxic traits that some parents have, which should not be a thing. Let's start off with the most common one, okay? It's very understandable that children are given allowances for their daily expenses, like their food, transportation, school expenses, and all that other stuff, which is fine. But there are those times when these toxic parents don't have enough money that they need to pay their bills and all their other expenses and all that other stuff. And so, the first thing that they do is approach their children. And they are going to borrow money from them. Okay? And here's the thing. After borrowing that money from those kids, there are some of them that don't even pay them back. Like, the thing is, like, it's very I understand the fact that, like, their money comes from you. That was originally your money. Their money comes from you. It's very understandable. But that does not give you the right to refuse payment. That does not give you the right to refuse paying your children if you ever owe them money. Because the moment you give that money to them, it's their money. They can do what they want with it. Like, what if maybe they had this big plan with their savings, okay? They had this big plan to do with their savings and all that other stuff. But then you took that plan away from them just by borrowing their money and not paying them back. And that is a very dick move as parents, okay? If any of you guys are one of these toxic parents, okay, that don't pay their children back, shame on you, okay? Like, just because their money comes from you, okay, doesn't mean you can refuse to pay them back. Okay, like it's their money now. It's your choice to give them that money. Therefore, it's their money. And don't ever think that, oh, just because I've given them their allowance, I think it's still my money. No, like they have the choice for that one. Just know and remember that what they are doing to you is wrong and is not a normal thing. They have to pay you back, but they don't. Now let's move on to this next toxic trait. It's a truth to know that parents must find some sort of way to discipline their children, okay? To discipline them, to let them know what's right or wrong, to let them know that, hey, what you said is right, what you said is wrong, what you did was the right thing, what you did was the wrong thing. Okay? That's one major part of being a parent to your kids. Now, there are some of those toxic parents that try to discipline them by giving them threats, by giving them huge warnings and all that other stuff like that. Like they will say, oh, I'm gonna call the cops on you, I'm gonna call the police, I'm gonna call this, I'm gonna call that. That way of doing it is very wrong. Okay? Because doing it that way will change their children's mindset and their children's point of view on policemen. I mean, I've met a lot of policemen. I've talked to a lot of policemen in the past. Like they're really nice people. They're kind people. Like they're nice. Just don't commit some crimes. Just don't do anything that violates the law. Then they'll be good to you. Okay? That's the thing. And the fact that they're threatening, the fact that parents are threatening their children by saying, I'm gonna call the police and other related threats, these children in the future will portray policemen as very harsh people, which is not necessarily the case. Like policemen are good people. Authorities will be very nice to you as long as you don't commit crimes and don't do anything that will violate or will simply break the law. Okay? Like the law will be good to you as long as you're good to it. Okay, that's the point that I'm trying to say here. And another point that I'll be trying to make is that when you parents are doing this to your children, especially if your children are still minors or under 13 years old, just know that threatening them like that is useless. Okay? Like there are other ways to teach or discipline your children. Just don't do it that way. Like especially children that are young as they are. Because what's the point of threatening like this and like that? Like you're gonna threaten them to call the police and all that other stuff. Considering the fact that young as they are, the police practically cannot touch them because they're under 18 years old. Okay? And trust me, like if there are those parents that actually do this to their children, these children will have a very negative mindset towards policemen and all these other law enforcers. Okay, like and to these children who have thought of policemen as this, you're wrong. Your parents taught you the wrong thing. Okay, like policemen and other law enforcers are very nice people. Like they'll be willing to approach to you if ever you need them, and since since your parents have taught you that policemen and all these other types of law enforcers are like this to you, you'll be technically afraid of them once you grow up. You'll be anarchists. You'll be people who go against the law. which could be the worst case scenario that could happen to these children. Which is why I'm saying, like, the only point that I'm trying to say here is that there are many other ways to discipline your kids. Just don't do it that way, okay? Because that's a rather dumb move. All right? Let's move on to the third toxic trait. Now, I know it must really hurt your feelings, or it really does offend you to have your parents compare you to another child. Okay? I know it really hurts. And I know those parents are gonna say stuff like, "Oh, why your friend? You see that friend of yours? Your friend is a lot better than you. Why can't you be like your friend?" and all that other stuff. "Oh, this student had more accomplishments than you. Why can't you be like him?" and all that other stuff. Okay? That is a big no-no. Okay? Like this toxicity, wherein parents compare their child for another child, has went on for generations to come, and someone has to say it, and I will. It is a very huge no-no. Okay? It's a very wrong thing to do, to compare your children, because if there's this one thing that's for certain, no two people are the same. There will always be personal differences. There will always be all these types of differences between two selected people. No matter how alike they look, no matter how similar they do, no matter how related they are, even twins have their own personal differences, which goes to show that no two people are the same. So don't compare your child to another, because once you keep doing this, okay, once you keep doing this, like these kids, like your kids, who you've been comparing to other children, will think to themselves as not good enough. Okay, they will have a very low self-esteem. They will have this very negative thinking towards themselves once you keep comparing this to these other children and all these other children that can do better than him or her. Basically, your child. Okay, like and there's this other thing that I want to say to you parents. Like, if you like that other kid over that kid of yours, the best thing to do is disown your kid and adopt that kid. That kid that you're comparing to your own. And basically, one last thing that I want to say is, like, when your kid is not doing as good as that other kid that you're comparing, it's technically your fucking fault. Okay? For not letting him do better, for not teaching him better, for not encouraging your child. This is the one thing that a lot of toxic parents have been doing to their kids lately. And I know that will lower their self-esteem in the long run. Okay? Like, instead of discouraging your own kids, why don't you as well encourage them? Instead of telling them, "Oh, this kid is better than you," why don't you try to tell them, "Oh, you'll be better next time. You just improve yourself," and all that other stuff. Like why don't you do that? There is no point for competition here. And this will not be a surprise if your children will copy your toxic traits whenever they become parents. And this cycle will just keep going on and on and on. And it will not stop until someone finally breaks it. And here I am being a voice for that. let's move on to the fourth toxic trait. Okay? Now, as students, it's definitely one thing to be curious about, well, your grades. I mean, grades are a standard way of measuring how well or how good you've been doing in school. Now, I have to be very honest to all of my viewers and to everyone watching this video right now, okay? Like, I have never done that well in school. I've never really made it to the top of the class. I was never like, I've always hung out with the nerds, but I never really got to have as high of grades as the nerd friends that I have. Shoutouts to them. And the thing is, whenever my teachers or instructors or professors are giving me these sorts of tasks to let them fill in with my grades, the one thing that I always do is let them know that I may not be that much good at this, but my point is, I'm trying. Like, I've always let them know that, hey, at least it's better to let them know that you're trying to get there, unlike not trying at all and just simply come crashing down. And there are those toxic parents who try to judge or rate their children simply by their grades. And I know there are those children out there who don't naturally do good in school because it's definitely, or it really is just not their thing. Well, I can tell you that, like, each and every individual can be a genius in their own way. Okay, like, there are plenty of standards, there are plenty of fields where you can be good at, where you can be smart at, where you can be wise at. Okay? And maybe the academic field is just not for you. Okay? Like, there are some people who have accepted that fact and actually ended up becoming a lot better and succeeding in life in many different ways. Like, take for example, the ones that have ended up becoming billionaires, that have ended up becoming the wealthiest people ever known. But the fact is that they've never even finished school, but still ended up being successful. Take guys like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. Okay, like, those guys left school, but ended up becoming a lot wealthier and more successful than the ones who have actually finished school. And that itself is evidence that you don't really need academic excellence to be truly successful, and you don't need to be successful to actually be happy and satisfied with yourself. Because true success comes in happiness, okay? Like, if you're happy with your life, if you're satisfied with the things that you have right now, you're already as good as successful. And that's what these toxic parents need to know. That grades is just a number. Okay, like, there are plenty of there are plenty of other fields that your children could possibly be good at. And that's the one thing that you toxic parents need to figure out on your children. Maybe your kids can do better in other ways. Like, maybe if they aren't doing that good in at school, if they're not doing that well academically, maybe there are other things that they can be good at. Encourage them in that other part of what they can be good at. Like, maybe there are other ways that they can succeed in life. Maybe just that, you know? Maybe all they need is a little encouragement. So please, cope up with them for once. let's move on to the fifth toxic trait. All right? Now, I know there are a lot of those Asian families out there that have some sort of business or some sort of property that they have that requires some sort of successor or somebody from the next of their generation that will continue the legacy that they have. And so at some point they will have to like dictate the some of their children's futures. And I think that's still something that's very disputable or debatable when it comes to that matter. But that's besides that. The one that I'm referring to, okay, are those toxic but sometimes not so toxic parents that will decide the future of their children for them instead of having their children themselves choose. Like, just to let you know that like your children are human beings as well, and they too have that decision to choose what they want, to choose to choose what they want to do in the future, what do they want to be when they grow up, and all that other stuff like that. Now, let's say there's this one family whose entire bloodline has had a nurse, at least one nurse in each generation. And then there's this one kid who plans to break that legacy by saying, no, I don't want to be a nurse. I'm not going to be a nurse. And then the thing is, if he doesn't want to follow that path that the rest of your family has been following, then don't force that kid. Like, let's just say maybe the path ends there. Okay, maybe that's how it goes. That's how it ends. That is how the path ends. Okay, like that's it. Like, I mean, in my case, if I were to have kids, if I were to have more than one kid, I'd have just one of them be into this field of creating memes and all that other stuff, and I'll make sure, and I'll be very sure that this will be something that they will be very into, considering the fact that like, well, memes has become a very huge phenomenon on the internet, and partaking in this phenomenon would definitely be a huge privilege, just like me right now. Okay, like if you're gonna let them, if you're gonna make them continue some sort of legacy that your family has had for so many generations, like, you gotta make sure that this is something that they will be into. Okay, just like the example that I just made, that I made just now, like just like having the memes and all that, because let's face it, a lot of people in the internet are into memes, and it's really an honor to give out my content to all of you. So like, if you're going to preserve the legacy like that, like, make sure it's going to be something that will end up as their interest, something that they will be interested in, something that they will be passionate in. Otherwise, what's the whole point if you're literally just forcing it down their throats? It'll be worth nothing. I can promise you that. And last but not the least, and probably the most despicable one out of them all, using your children as retirement plan. Now, I personally think of this as just cruel and rude to your own kids. And I know the thing is that like, children have to pay back to their parents in some sort of way for what they did to them when they were still kids. That's understandable. But using your kids' salaries, like a portion of their salaries, as a retirement plan, is just despicable. Like, that's asking too much from them. Okay? Like, you have your own pension. Like, I know like whenever a certain worker like retires from their job, I know they will be given some sort of pay to like compensate for their basic needs. Like in this case, when they retire, it's basically a pension. And there are some of those parents whose pension they have is not high enough to sustain them themselves. And so they ask probably a bit too much from their kids. And that's when they suddenly become, and that's when they suddenly start becoming a hindrance to their kids. Okay, like sure, maybe when they were little, or when they were still when they were still small, when they were still babies, maybe you thought of them as being a hindrance to you. But now that they're all grown up, this time it's you being a hindrance to your kids. Like, please stop thinking like this. And if there are any of you parents who actually fucking think like this, please change your mindset for the good of your kids. For once. Okay? Your children have rights too. So let them practice that.